I'm John. I'm 24, recently between apartments, and just trying to keep my life in one piece. Rent shot up, my lease ended, and I didn't have a backup plan. It was one of those messy transitions you hope will be temporary but have no idea how long they'll last. I called up an old friend, Tyler, who I'd known since high school. We were never daily texting close, but close enough that when I asked if he knew anyone renting out a room, he said, "Why don't you just stay with us for a bit?" He lived at home still. His dad had passed when he was a kid, so it was just him and his mom in this two-story house in the quiet part of town. Suburban, safe, outdated in a charming way. "We've got a guest room," he told me. "Stay as long as you need." So I packed 2 duffel bags and a backpack and moved in. His mom's name was Amelia. Mid-40s, maybe, but you wouldn't guess it if you didn't know. She had that kind of presence that was hard to describe without sounding like you were trying too hard. Confident, yes. Attractive? Undeniably, but not in some flashy way. There was something in the way she moved, the way she didn't rush, didn't over-explain. Her hair was always loosely tied back, her clothes simple and well-worn in a way that made you think she didn't care how she looked, which only made her look better. I figured it'd be awkward. I mean, you don't expect to be living in your friend's mom's house at 24. But the first few days were surprisingly normal. I helped with dishes, offered to do my own laundry, tried not to take up too much space. Amelia was friendly, warm, but not overly familiar. We had short chats in the kitchen, joked a bit. That was it. But there was something, a shift I couldn't quite name. It started small. A look held a second too long. A hand on my shoulder that didn't move away right away. A comment about how quiet I was. One morning, I was eating toast, and she walked in wearing a robe, not revealing, exactly, but it was more the way she didn't adjust it when she saw me. Like I wasn't even there. Or like I was. Tyler was in and out a lot. Work, friends, dating someone new, so I was alone in the house more often than I expected. And so was she. The tension was unspoken, carefully contained, but real. One night, about 3 weeks in, I came back late from a job interview. Tyler was out with his girlfriend. I figured Amelia would be asleep. I made tea, sat down in the kitchen just to catch my breath. She came downstairs barefoot, in a long t-shirt, rubbing her eyes. "You're back," she said, and then, after a pause, I couldn't sleep. I don't know what shifted in that moment, but I remember the feeling in my chest, like something tightening, not in fear, in awareness. We sat across from each other, each with our mugs. We talked about nothing. About how she couldn't drink coffee after 3 p.m. or it'd keep her up. About how I wasn't sure I got the job. She was kind, thoughtful, too interested in my answers. She asked, "You okay?" Like she actually wanted to know. And when I stood to take my mug to the sink, she stood too. Just slightly too close. Nothing happened that night. But I laid in bed later, eyes wide open, and realized I was already thinking about her more than I should. Not as Tyler's mom. Just Amelia. The days after that night blurred together. I kept telling myself it was nothing. That I was reading into things because I was lonely, displaced, in someone else's home. But the truth is, something had already changed. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it. It started with how often we were in the same room. Not on purpose. Not exactly. But if I was in the kitchen, she'd come in a few minutes later, humming to herself. If I sat on the porch, she'd ask if I minded company. Once, I caught her standing at the hallway mirror adjusting an earring, and when she saw me, she said, "Do I look okay?" Like my opinion mattered. The casualness of it made it worse. Or better. I don't know. She didn't flirt, not overly. She was just warm. Natural. And maybe that was the most dangerous part. She didn't have to try. She started touching me more. Small things. Her fingers brushing mine when she handed me a dish. Her hand on my back when she passed behind me in the kitchen. Nothing you could point at and say that meant something. But it did. I'd catch her watching me sometimes, not in an obvious way, but in the way people do when they think no one's looking. A few times, I turned and caught her mid-glance, and she didn't look away immediately. That did something to me. Lit something up inside I wasn't ready to deal with. I tried talking to Tyler more. Tried leaving the house, going for walks, staying out late. But no matter what I did, I kept coming back to that house, to the low lighting, the quiet evenings, the smell of whatever tea she always had brewing. One night, we were both in the kitchen again. Tyler was out, of course. It was late. She was making herself a cup of tea. I was grab-eye. "Can I make you one?" she asked, already reaching for a second mug. "Sure," I said, even though I wasn't in the mood. I just wanted to stay there. She leaned against the counter, barefoot, wearing a loose cardigan and those soft linen pants she always wore around the house. I remember thinking, she always looks like she just walked out of a memory. She handed me the cup, and for a second, our fingers touched. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. Then she smiled, small, quiet, but a little sad. It's strange having someone else in the house again, she said. A man, I mean. I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. We sat in silence, drinking tea, barely saying a word. And yet it felt louder than any conversation. A few days later, she knocked on my door. Late. Too late for it to be casual. She had a cup of tea in her hand, and she said, "Thought you might want something warm." I nodded, let her in. She sat on the edge of my bed, just for a second. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded again. "Just hard to sleep sometimes." She nodded like she understood. "Yeah," she said. "Me too." Then there was this pause. Like we were both standing at the edge of something. I held the cup, still warm between my hands. She reached out, just a finger, and brushed mine. That was all it took. My heart slammed against my chest. I looked up. She didn't move away. She didn't say anything. I leaned forward, slowly, carefully. My lips met hers like they already knew the shape of each other. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It was quiet, heavy, filled with everything we hadn't said for weeks. She didn't stop me, and I didn't want to stop. The next morning, we acted like it hadn't happened. Not in a cold way. Just like people who had touched something they weren't supposed to, and now weren't sure what to do with their hands. She made breakfast like usual. I poured coffee. We said good morning. But everything was different. We didn't talk about it. But we didn't avoid it, either. When our eyes met, it stayed a second too long. When we passed in the hallway, our shoulders brushed. When she said, "Sleep well," her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. That evening, I found myself wandering down to the living room. She was there, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a book, reading glasses on. The TV was off. The room dim. She looked up. "Hey," she said softly, like she'd been waiting. "Couldn't sleep," I mumbled, though it was barely past 10. She lifted the blanket and motioned toward the other end of the couch. I sat. We didn't touch. But that invisible thread between us, it was taut, pulled tight. After a while, she closed the book, set it on the table, turned toward me, legs tucked underneath her. "I keep thinking," she said, barely above a whisper, "that this is dangerous." I nodded. "I know." "And still," she said, reaching out, her fingers tracing the back of my hand, "I can't seem to help it." We didn't kiss that night. We just sat like that, in that strange middle space between restraint and want. And maybe that was the scariest part, how easy it was to stay there. But the next time, and there was a next time, we didn't hold back. Tyler was gone for the weekend. Amelia made dinner, pasta, wine, soft music playing low in the kitchen. I offered to clean up, but she shook her head. "Come sit," she said. Her voice was different. Certain. I followed her to the living room. She sat beside me, not across the room this time, and when she handed me the glass of wine, her fingers lingered. Then she leaned in and kissed me. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just her hand at the back of my neck, mine on her waist, and the kind of kiss that fills your whole body with silence. We didn't talk afterward. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I held her like I'd been holding something in for weeks. Maybe I had. That night, we didn't sleep together. Not in the full sense. But we stayed like that until the room grew dark and quiet, until her breathing slowed, until I realized I wasn't tired at all, just afraid. Afraid of how natural it felt. We told ourselves we'd be careful. We made little rules that didn't hold. Only when Tyler wasn't home. Only if the door was locked. Only. But those limits blurred fast. A touch in the hallway. A stolen kiss in the laundry room. A whispered, "We shouldn't be doing this," followed by silence, and then doing it anyway. She kept saying, "This is the last time." But it never was. We didn't talk about what it meant. We didn't say things like relationship or affair. We didn't dream out loud. We didn't plan. It was all moment to moment. Like lighting a match over and over again, knowing eventually one of them would burn the house down. But still, I kept going back. Because every time she looked at me like that, like I wasn't just someone filling a space in her house, but someone who filled a space in her, I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Once it started, there was no going back. Not emotionally. Not physically. It wasn't constant, but it was consistent. A rhythm, like tides. Quiet, full of tension, always returning. We got good at the dance, at slipping into moments and out of them without leaving footprints. Tyler was around enough that it forced us to be careful. Glances across the dinner table. A slight brush of fingers when I passed her the salt. Words layered in meaning when he wasn't listening. Sometimes, I'd wake up and find her already downstairs. Dressed, composed, pouring coffee. She'd hand me a mug and smile like the night before hadn't happened, but her hand would linger just a second longer than it should. And that was all I needed. She was the one who kept the boundary hazy. She'd say, "This isn't smart," or "We have to stop." But then she'd call my name in that soft voice when I was about to go to bed. She'd say, "Just stay for a minute," and that minute would become an hour. A kiss. A touch. Another line crossed. There was one night I remember more than the others. The house was dark except for the porch light spilling into the kitchen. I came downstairs to get water. She was already there, wearing a loose sweater, hair tied up messily, eyes tired but bright. We didn't speak. She stepped toward me, touched my face, and kissed me like she hadn't seen me in years. That was the first time she whispered my name against my skin. It felt real. Too real. The guilt was always there, not sharp, but dull, like background noise. She never mentioned Tyler, and I didn't either. That was the rule. Our thing existed outside of that reality. A separate timeline. A secret echo of something that might have been right in another life. But cracks started forming. One morning, she sat across from me with her hand wrapped around a coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I feel like I'm always waiting for this to collapse," she said. "Like I've built a second life out of cards and breath." I didn't know how to answer. So I just nodded. "Me too. We never said, 'I love you.' I think we were afraid of what that would do. Afraid that naming it would make it impossible to ignore the cost." Still, there were moments. She'd laugh at something dumb I said and lean her head against my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. Or I'd be heading out and she'd touch my wrist and say, "Be careful," and it would land heavier than it should. Once, when Tyler was away for a weekend, we spent nearly 2 full days together. Cooking, talking, kissing between conversations. It felt like a glimpse of something too big to hold. But every time the front door opened and Tyler came home, I felt it, that quiet slam of reality. The return to roles. To distance. To pretending. That Sunday evening, we all had dinner together, Amelia, Tyler, and me. She made roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, lit candles like it was nothing special. Tyler joked about work. I nodded along. And across the table, Amelia met my eyes. For a second, it was just us. And then it wasn't. After dinner, Tyler went upstairs. I stayed back to help her clean. Our hands touched over the sink, and I felt her pull away before it could linger. She dried her hands, looked at me for a long time, and said quietly, "This can't keep happening." I nodded, but I also knew it would, because we didn't know how to stop. It had been going on for nearly 2 months. Maybe longer if you count the moments before anything actually happened. The quiet looks. The soft questions. The tension. But eventually, even the best-kept secret starts to feel too heavy. Like it's dragging behind every step, pressing into every breath. It was a Wednesday morning. I remember that because the sky was gray, and the whole house smelled like rain and cinnamon. I came downstairs and found her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug that had long since gone cold. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Morning," I said, cautiously. She nodded. "Sit down." That tone, too calm, too quiet. I sat. "I've been thinking," she said. I still on the mug. "This thing, whatever it is, it has to stop." The words didn't hit me all at once. They arrived like a slow wave, washing over everything I'd been pretending not to feel. I didn't ask why. I already knew. She kept talking. "Tyler's been different lately, asking more questions. And I'm tired of holding my breath." I nodded, slowly. I didn't want to make it harder. I didn't want to beg. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were glassy, but steady. "I can't lose him," she said. "I can't risk the only life I have. The one that works." "I understand," I said. And I did. More than she probably knew. There was a long silence. Not cold. Not angry. Just full. Like everything we didn't say was sitting between us in that tiny space. "I wish it didn't have to end like this," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Just for a second. Then she let go. Stood up. Poured the cold tea down the sink. I didn't ask if she meant it. I didn't ask if she'd change her mind. Because I think deep down, I knew this was how it had to end. The next few days were strange. She wasn't distant, exactly, but something had closed. We still passed each other in the hallway, still exchanged small talk, but none of it lingered. I started packing up my things without really meaning to, just little by little. A book here, a sweater there. I found a short-term sublet in the city and said it was because I needed to be closer to work. Tyler didn't question it. He helped me carry boxes to my car. The night before I left, Amelia and I crossed paths in the backyard. She was watering her plants in the dim porch light. I was tossing a bag into my truck. "You heading out early?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Figured I'd beat traffic." She nodded. Didn't say anything else for a moment. Then, quietly, "You were never just a distraction. You know that, right?" I looked at her. "Yeah," I said. "I know." She looked down. I just couldn't figure out how to hold it all. "I never asked you to." And that was it. No last kiss. No dramatic goodbye. Just a quiet night, a trunk full of half-packed boxes, and the sound of the hose still running in the dark. I left the next morning before anyone else was awake. The apartment I found was nothing special, a one-bedroom above a pizza shop with thin walls and a window that faced a brick wall. But it was mine, or at least it wasn't hers. And that felt like a step. The first few weeks blurred together. New job, new commute, unpacking boxes I didn't remember packing. People asked how I was doing and I said, fine, because it was easier than explaining the hollow stretch of silence that came with leaving something unfinished. I didn't talk to Tyler much after I moved. He'd text occasionally, ask about my new place, send me a meme or a video of his dog. I replied, but with less detail. We weren't cold, just quieter. Some friendships don't break, they just fade to low volume. I thought about Amelia more than I wanted to. Not just her face or the way she spoke my name, but those things lingered. It was the little things. The smell of her tea. The way she said, "Be safe," like she really meant it. The way silence had never felt awkward with her. I missed that most, being seen without needing to perform. I didn't date anyone for a while. I told myself I was busy. Truth was, no one felt real. Not in the way she had. And when nights got quiet, when the noise of the city faded and I was left with just my own breathing and the glow of the street lamp against my wall, my mind wandered back to that house. To the hush of early mornings. To the sound of her barefoot steps on wood floors. To the living room, where nothing was said but everything was felt. I wondered if she ever thought about me. If, when she made tea at night, she thought about that first time she brought a cup to my room. If she regretted it. If she missed it. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was starting over. That I was stronger now. But the truth? Some people imprint on you. Quietly. Deeply. And no amount of distance can change that. Then one Saturday morning, almost a year to the day I'd left, I was walking downtown. Just running errands. Coffee, groceries, nothing dramatic. I ducked into this small coffee shop I'd never been to, one of those quiet places with chipped mugs and soft music and baristas who don't smile too much. I was halfway through ordering when I heard her voice behind me. "John." I froze, turned around, and there she was. Amelia. Same eyes. A little more tired, maybe. A little more guarded. But her hair was down, loose around her shoulders, and for a second, everything between us came rushing back like it had just happened yesterday. I blinked. "Amelia," I said, quietly. She smiled. Small. Careful. "Didn't think I'd see you again." I didn't either. She stepped forward, hesitated, then leaned in and hugged me. Brief, but real. We sat down by the window, coffee in hand, and for a while, we just talked. Light things. Work. Weather. A mutual update disguised as casual conversation. Then, as I reached for a napkin, she said it. "I don't live there anymore." I looked up. She shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "Moved out a few months ago. Needed something of my own." I nodded. "That's good." Another pause. She looked out the window, then back at me. "I still think about that night," she said. And just like that, the room felt smaller, quieter, full again. Something in my chest pulled tight. "I do too," I said. She didn't smile. She just looked at me. And then she asked, almost too softly, "Do you have time?" She asked if I had time, and I said yes before I could think. Before the part of me that was supposed to be rational, careful, stepped in to warn me. We left the coffee shop and walked without a destination. The air was soft and warm, that kind of mid-spring stillness that feels like a held breath. We didn't say much at first. Just the shuffle of shoes on sidewalk, the distant hum of the city. "I'm renting a place not far from here," she said after a while. Small. Quiet. "It's different." I nodded. Difference good. She looked over at me, her expression unreadable. It's lonely, sometimes. I didn't know what to say. The honesty in that sentence wasn't casual. It was something else. I thought maybe, if I left the house, the memories, it would fade, she added. But it didn't. We stopped at a small park. Just a bench under a tree. She sat first. I followed. I've gone over it in my head so many times, she said. What we did. What we were. I stayed quiet. The air felt heavier with each word. I'm not proud of how it started. Not proud of how I let it keep going. But I'm also not sorry it happened. I turned to look at her. Her face was soft, tired. There wasn't any makeup this time, no performance. Just her. I'm not sorry either, I said. It mattered. She nodded, and something in her face eased. Like she'd been holding her breath for a year and finally exhaled. A bird chirped nearby. The leaves above us stirred. The moment didn't need more words. Eventually, she stood. I should get going, she said. Groceries. Errands. Life. I stood too. Yeah, of course. But neither of us moved. She hesitated. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. Wrote something. Handed it to me. My number. It's the same. But I didn't know if you still had it. I took it. She stepped back. You don't have to call. I wanted you to have it. I nodded. Thanks. She gave a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes, but almost did. Then she turned and walked away. And I stood there, alone, paper in hand, heart too loud in my chest. I didn't open it right away. I waited until I got back to my apartment, sat on my bed, and stared at her handwriting. There was a note under the number. Just a few words. I still remember that evening. I didn't text her that night. I didn't call. But I kept the paper, tucked it in my wallet, behind a card I never use. I don't know what this is now. I don't know if we're meant to cross paths again or if that park bench was the last soft chapter of something impossible. But when she said she remembered, when she looked at me like the time hadn't dulled anything between us, something in me cracked open again. So here I am, not asking for advice, not trying to justify what happened, just needing to say it out loud, finally. I loved her. Maybe I still do.